Deputy Secretary Sherman will spend 3 days off a trip from the 2nd to the 4th of May in South Africa. She will visit 3 of South Africa's major cities, including Cape Town, Johannesburg and Pretoria. Her visit will include a meeting with South African Deputy Foreign Minister Alvin Boertes and other senior government officials. They will discuss US-South African cooperation on a range of issues. These will include global and regional peace and security, trade and investment, sustainable infrastructure, health security, and the climate crisis. Sherman will also meet with business leaders and entrepreneurs to discuss strengthening the important trade and investment relationship between the US and South Africa. The Deputy Secretary will further present the International Women of Courage Award during a discussion with women leaders promoting human rights for marginalized communities. In Angola, she will meet President João Lourenço and Foreign Minister Tete Antonio. She will become the highest-ranking U.S. government official to meet Lourenço before Angola goes to the polls later in August. Sherman will round up her African safari in Gabon, where she will meet President Ali Bongo Ondimba, Foreign Minister Michael Musa Adamo, and Minister of Defense Felicite Onguri Ngubili. They will engage in shared priorities, including promoting environmental protection, addressing the climate crisis, and furthering security cooperation. The last leg of her tour will be in France, where she will meet officials from Italy, Germany, France and the UK to discuss close coordination to respond to the war in Ukraine.
Let's discuss this matter further now. The significance of the visit for Africa. We're joined by international relations expert Professor John Stremlau. Very good evening to you, Professor Stremlau, and thank you so much for speaking to us. So, Ms. Sherman has said she's looking forward to the four-nation trip and says the priorities will be on peace and security, trade, investment, health security and climate crises. So obviously these in their totality are what are contemporary issues or challenges that would be part of binational talks. What would you say is top of the list? Let's start in South Africa, where she's arrived.
Well, thank you very much. I have to begin by saying that I think the importance of this trip is really South Africa. This is an opportunity for Wendy Sherman, Molly Phee, and Dana Banks to hear what South Africa's concerns are and to share views about where America and South Africa think the relationship between these two very diverse, different democracies, but democracies since the end of the Cold War and the end of apartheid have grown increasingly closer in a variety of functional, important areas. I was heartened by the plans before the Ukraine war erupted to have a strategic dialogue between the two countries comparable to what was attempted under Vice President Al Gore and Deputy President Thabo Mbeki in the aftermath of the end of apartheid and the rise of the Clinton administration. The Democrats, I should add, are much more responsive and sympathetic to African aspirations, but particularly the challenges facing this diverse country of South Africa. And that's what's really important here. But of course, like Cyril Ramaphosa, who's dependent on voters' support to continue in office, so too is Joseph Biden. And Biden has been a real friend of South Africa ever since the override of the Reagan veto of the anti-apartheid legislation back in '86. So he's predisposed to want to listen to what South Africa has to say, and I think this is a productive trip. But I just add, this delegation is very high-powered. I mean, I think they've had 80 years of experience in foreign policy and international relations among them. Wendy Sherman, I worked with briefly in the State Department back 30 years ago when she was Assistant Secretary for Legislative Affairs. She's super smart, listens very, very well, and very, very capable. Now in her early 70s, Molly Phee is an experienced Foreign Service officer, now 59. Dana Banks is much younger, but that's what is appropriate for the NSC director.
As you mentioned, the Ukraine, we know that South Africa's stance on culpability or how the United Nations should have or should handle or view this current crisis has caused some discomfiture for the US, particularly President Joe Biden. He and President Ramaphosa have had conversations around this. How can this be taken further? So while you're strengthening relations, but also respecting each other's diverse point of view?
Well, I've been struck, frankly, by the fact that the Americans have not made more of this issue. I'm very caught up with it and debating the Ukraine conflict and what it means for Africa all of the time down here. It is often, I'm often reminded that the U.S. invaded Iraq, something I was not at all enthusiastic about in the aftermath of 9/11 back when I was first living in South Africa. And it's a very different circumstance. On the one hand, Saddam Hussein was very different than Volodymyr Zelensky and the Democrats in Ukraine. And the issue here is one of conquest, that is to say, in my view, the invasion. Now, I know the Americans and I tend to talk that way about it. Sidney Mufamadi clarified the fact that he did not use that term when he was talking to Jake Sullivan recently, but he did it in a very diplomatic way. And I think that the Americans have shown that they can certainly conduct a business with South Africa in trade and public health and climate change and a whole variety of other issues. And this Ukraine issue, which is very, very foremost in President Biden, and Secretary Blinken was to have come to South Africa, I believe, but this was preempted by the sudden special military action, as Putin describes it, into Ukraine. I think that the relationship can deepen and broaden, but it's going to take a little work on both sides, and I think both sides are interested in doing so.
And I want to talk about that, the potential for rancor on issues that are either deemed divisive or become divisive. We know that when talking about trade, there's been a difference of opinion on AGOA and its benefits for Africa or South Africa and the areas in which there ought to be changes. So we know that trade is high up on the agenda, and Ms. Sherman has also said that enhancing health security is at the top of that. The issue of vaccine hoarding, especially from the West, has been something that's also, riled African countries and leaderships. The U.S. has made donations. How can they smooth over some of these issues?
Well, it helps, frankly, that both South Africa and the United States are liberal democracies. They believe in the rule of law. They believe in freedom of speech and free press. They are both highly unequal, and they both have horrible racist histories. And America has yet to come to terms. One sees in the struggle going on within the United States right now that they want to become increasingly a country that belongs to all who live there, united in its diversity. But that's not the view of Donald Trump, and it's not the view of those who follow him, who want America first and want an isolationist and a restoration of white supremacy, frankly. But I don't think that's going to work. But it is going to have to be fought out within the domestic politics of the United States, just as the domestic politics in this country are so intense and preoccupying for Cyril Ramaphosa. It's an irony that people think that democracies are as aggressive as autocratic countries, but democracies don't empower people unless they have votes of the people who hold them accountable. And on vaccines, that was a domestic political issue. I didn't like at all the way the United States hoarded vaccines. I thought it was a terrible, terrible disgrace. However, I understood it in political terms, just as I understand the political constraints that face President Ramaphosa here in many of the choices he has to make. And we know those perfectly well, but it is a sign of a different kind of a political culture than exists in China or in Russia. This doesn't mean that South Africa can't have good and productive relationships with China and Russia, but it's of a different order, it seems to me, than the kind of relationship it has with a country as diverse as and pluralistic as America and as open as America.
All right, just a final question. Ms. Sherman Strip, with her delegation, will also take her to Angola and Gabon. I'm intrigued by this, the meeting between Angola's Minister of State and Head of Military Affairs, as well as the U.S. Secretary of Defense. At a meeting, there was an agreement between the two on making Angola the Pan-African peacekeeping leader. Please share with us the rationale behind this and what is expected to come out of the talks when she meets President Ali Bongo Ondimba in Gabon.
Well, I can plead ignorance on the part of what is going on within the politics of Angola and Gabon. They are important countries, yes. They are members of the African Union, yes. But they are nowhere near as open and complex as an important in long-term strategic sense for America's getting on with Africa and being responsive to Africa's concerns as the views that come forward from here. This is the country where America makes its biggest foreign assistance grants to PEPFAR. It's the country that has the deepest cultural ties to America in Africa right now, and it's the country that has the most influence. You just have to look at Trevor Noah and Elon Musk. I mean, my goodness, it is really streets ahead of America's relationships with other African countries, and qualitatively different because of our common history of terrible racist oppression.
All right, thank you so much for your time and insight, Professor John Stremlau.